A good part of my experience, I have been in medium enterprises, including the present IT services company. And in the first 15 years of my experience, which was spent in multinational corporations, the primary competition was from the small scale industries. Therefore, I'm quite familiar with the small scale industry and medium scale industry dynamic. And we are today talking about the sharpening of sales and marketing strategies. Today's webinar topic is a topic for all seasons and all manners of companies. In scripting this presentation, I have kept the target audience of small and medium enterprises. Before we proceed, I would like to explain the word strategy briefly. You know, this is a term which is oftentimes misused, or shall we say, used inappropriately. And a preferred way of comprehending what the word strategy connotes is to look at an example from our own good old cricket. Now, let us look at a virtual situation wherein batting first, India is back at the dressing room in England, and they have piled up 270 runs in the day and night match being played against England. And they're back in the dressing room. What do you think will happen there? Now, it's quite clear that Dhoni will not be giving a pep talk to the boys. He is dealing with veterans like Sachin, Yuvraj, and Bhaji, and they all know their departments. They are also supercharged with all the energy, and they know what exactly to do on the field. But still, they would have a strategy session for about maybe a half an hour or thereabouts to look at what will be the game plan for the rest of the day. The goal too is very obvious. Having made a total of 270 runs, we would need to prevent the English team from reaching anywhere near this target. And what they would be perhaps discussing would be a slew of measures which will ensure that the goal is accomplished. And if they have to accomplish that goal, what should they do? They will probably be looking at a variety of measures in terms of how would they be using the spin attack or the space attack. In the first 15 overs, would they be limiting the run pile-up, or will they be taking wickets? What kind of strategy would they adopt in terms of a defense or offense? What kind of field placement will they be doing? These are all some of the issues, and I believe that this kind of a discussion does take place before they go back to the field. The word strategy is in fact made up of this kind of stuff. Strategy is one thing which is more than the sum of its parts, and doubtless it is goal focused. Friends, while I'm giving this example of cricket, you all know that business is not cricket. It doesn't have a limited 50-over run or anything like that. It's an ongoing continuum, and therefore we would have to take this example more as a metaphor and not as an identical example that can give you all that I'm going to speak about it, strategy today. It is just a flavor of the kind of stuff that we are going to be talking this afternoon. Before we really understand what strategy is, we also need to know what strategy is not. You perhaps are wondering what is a Rishi doing there in the slide, and I want to just introduce you to a simple concept of what is called Neti Neti, which is very popular in the scriptural tradition in the country, in India. When I say scriptural tradition, I mean the Vedic learning method, wherein the student tries to understand a esoteric concept by eliminating what it is not. Shvetaketu, who is one of the very famous rishis of the Upanishadic times, had made this particular technique, or he had even perfected this technique called neti neti, which means in Sanskrit, not this, not this. He would look at every other alternative and possibility and rule that out before he would understand what the particular concept is. Therefore, we also need to look at strategy by first looking at what strategy is not. Oftentimes, people do mistake strategy for operational effectiveness and efficiency, and these measures, that is, measures which ensure operational effectiveness and also efficiency, while they are essential for business, they are not comprising of what is called as strategy. Now let us try to understand a little more of this. You know, all of us are very familiar with some of these steps which I am showing you on the slide, which is not the subject matter of our discussion, but I am just introducing these slides to you to know that these are all some of the things. It's not an exhaustive list. There is a lot more. All of you are very familiar with measures which improve the productivity. Productivity could be material productivity, or it could be labor productivity. Then there is the total quality management techniques, made famous by the Japanese companies. Benchmarking, re-engineering, looking at all parts that go into making a product and re-engineer that so that it consumes less material, easier to make, more interchangeable, and so on and so forth. Then lastly, outsourcing. Let me just take two of these items and just give you a little bit of what I'm in fact trying to say. You know, in the journey of quest for productivity, there are two broad lines. One is material productivity, and then there is the labor productivity. Why this is very important in terms of improving the productivity, the company loses this advantage over a period of time. Let me just give you a real life example at this stage. When I was in the Swedish match company, we made matches. The head was stuck onto the splint or the stick by using an adhesive called animal glue, which is made out of bones. For a very long time, almost 60 years in this country, the match factory started way back in 1920s. The glue which was used to hold all the chemicals together, which you see on the match stick, was put together by an animal glue. The company had to find a suitable change for this or a replacement for this for different reasons, and in its quest for a better material, they found an ideal material called casein, which some of you might know is a milk protein, and it is available in any dairy zone where milk gets spoiled, and ultimately what comes out of that is a material called milk protein, which is by name, it is named as casein. And this was used in place of animal glue as an adhesive. Now, this was a very successful material replacement. It was not only cheaper, it also had an additional advantage for the company because it was also humidity resistant, which was very important for a matchstick to function in very rain-fed kind of environments. Now, we had a good run of one year, and after some time, we found that the competition also was using casein. Why does that happen? Because competitors constantly keep looking at what the leader does, and ultimately this information, this technology becomes commonplace. It's just a matter of time. What happens is that the vendor who gives you the casein himself goes and talks to the competitors and says that I'm supplying this to Swedish Match. Would you like to try it? I don't know what they are doing with it, but I suspect it is for the matchstick. But maybe you would like to try it also, and sooner or later, lo and behold, you will see casein being used by the entire competition. And oftentimes the chemists who work in your company also can perhaps, jump the fence and go and join the competitors and do this exactly, and such kind of things are not entirely preventable. Therefore, quest for productivity and productivity improvements and labor productivity improvements are very, very important in the survival and growth of companies and improving bottom line. They are not strategies, because they, sooner or later, the field will be leveled. Competitors also will be doing exactly the same thing that you are doing. Similarly, take outsourcing, for instance. Of course, outsourcing is a modern jargon. We have known outsourcing by an earlier avatar of it called subcontracting, which has been in existence for as long as we know business practices in the country. Way back in 60s and 70s, when we had to deal with unionization and so forth, we would subcontract the company vehicles to drivers hired from outside. We would do the payroll outside. We would do the cleaning and sweeping, swapping, etc. of factories and offices through outside agencies. Loading and unloading was invariably carried out by outside agencies and not by company labor. And these are not, while these will definitely cut the costs and bring a lot more smoother functioning of the company, they are not very much special to you. Every other company also has a similar kind of an opportunity, and they also ape you to kind of do this. While this is important, this is very essential, but nothing unique about these kind of things. Therefore, many of these things which I have just now listed are, while essential, are not strategies. Strategic positioning actually means performing different activities from rivals, or performing similar activities in different ways than the rivals. This is just one definition which I have. I'm sure strategy can be defined in different ways. The essence of strategic positioning, essence of strategy, is doing things differently than your competitor. Such kind of strategic positioning can be based on some of these measures or some of these dimensions. I don't want to say that this is exhaustive, but these are some of the key items which I would like to be talking today. First one is a strategy can be based on, a unique strategy can be based on customer needs. Strategy, as I have mentioned to you earlier, is a unique combination of measures which will give you, which will deliver a value proposition to the client. Now let us take the customer needs as one of the dimensions on which strategy can be based. Now, way back in the 60s and 70s decade, when you did not have the today's ubiquitous soft drinks scene that you see everywhere, we had Coca-Cola Corporation leading the pack, and Coke was a very dominant soft drink during those days. Cola flavor was its specialty, though they did have the other flavors as well. Now, in trying to build a strategy around customer needs, one of the first things that the Coca-Cola company did was to change the habits of the consumer by entering his, let's say, the refrigerator of the consumer at home. It was very important that we needed to understand that the competition for Coke is not just merely another soft drink, but also other drinks like tea, coffee, water, milk, buttermilk, and so on and so forth. Therefore, there was a strategic approach, a strategic decision taken to change consumer habits by entering the homes of the potential consumers and supplying Coke to the homes even as far back as 60s and 70s decades. Of course, bulk of the consumption of soft drinks, as you know, takes place on the streets which we used to call as the on-premise segment. But that is an impulse purchase based on customer tastes. Therefore, it was important that the customer taste had to be engineered in such a manner that he will, when he is there out in the field, feeling thirsty and a hot atmosphere, he will reach for a Coke and not anything else. And therefore, a strategy was built around this concept, and a consumer need-based strategy was hatched out, and it was systematically implemented in urban India. Then there is a strategy which can be built around customer accessibility. I will perhaps talk about this a little later in my next slide, but let's go to the next item, which is variety of products and service offerings. Perhaps some of you know already that there is a company called IKEA in Sweden which manufactures a variety of furniture. Now, you might wonder, a small country of barely 8-9 million population is today supplying furniture to a very large part of the planet in major cities of North America, Europe, and even parts of Asia. And their entire strategy is based on tackling the target consumers through a variety of products, understanding his basic need of style at a particular price which he can afford. In fact, definitely he is looking for, the younger crowd is looking for style, but at a very affordable price, much lower than the marketplace. Therefore, what they have done over the years, almost since last 2-3 decades, is to make the product, the furniture, etc., in a broken down, disassembled condition, ship it like that, and let the customer look at the entire variety of products under one single roof. They didn't have to kind of go in for this fancy furniture showrooms in the big cities, in the metros, which are very, very expensive. On the other hand, what they did was they took a large expanse of land and built a huge big showroom wherein they put up this entire variety of products that they have and service offerings, and everything was do it yourself. The younger crowd did not mind doing it by itself, but they did like the style, they did like the design, and of course they liked the price. They had to take it themselves, and there was a very clear instruction and how you could assemble it. So this was a kind of a strategy which they used for attacking this particular market of youngsters. They put their entire variety for people to see. They did make a trade-off in terms of, they were not having, salespeople who would, conduct you through the showroom or anything of the sort. It was a do-it-yourself kind of thing. Everything was available for you to see. There were books which you can pick it up. You can make your own, selections, and then ultimately give it to the billing counter, and then you will also pack it up and then have it delivered at your place in a matter of a week or 10 days, and you would do the assembly yourself. IKEA in Sweden very successfully implemented all across the world. Now, having seen some of these items of dimensions of, shall we say, on which strategy can be based on, let us look at the elements of a strategy. When I say elements of a strategy, I mean what does a typical strategy made up of? What kind of things are we talking about? That in every case you have all these 3, 4, 5 items. Some of them may be more relevant, some of them may be less relevant. But one thing is very certainly true, is that goal setting is a very important part of any strategy. I think it's very obvious to all of us that without a very clear goal, a strategy cannot be hatched out. Now, after having set a goal, we now have to do the next most important thing, which is basically aligning the company's core competency with market opportunity. In order to explain this, I would like to go in for a personal experience in the company where I worked earlier, Swedish Match, and we had a situation wherein we were facing with a serious shortage of softwood. Perhaps many of you who were born post 1970-80 would not know that 100% of the matches once upon a time in our country was being made by wooden boxes, both inner and outer, as well as wooden sticks. After 50-60 years of continuous denudation of forests, the softwood became quite scarce, particularly the softwood meant for the boxes, which had a very narrow range of selection. Swedish Match was and it continues to be, the only large-scale mechanized match unit, and rest of the competition was all in the small-scale field, or tiny sector field even. Match factories could be as big as just 20 employees, and you have a match product out of that. Such was the kind of a competitive dynamic. Swedish Match enjoyed a 20% market share nationally. But how did this 20% come? It didn't come uniformly from all across. It was in pockets, clusters, much higher percentage. But nationally, if you were to take an average, it would look like a 20% market share. What happened out of due to this kind of continuous denudation was a raw material shortage, which led to a certain kind of a disruption. It was coming for some time, and then either the industry could have waited until the shortage absolutely manifested, and then the consumer was forced to kind of take what was given, or alternatively, being a leader, Swedish Match could put together its core competency and popularize the cardboard matches. There were previous attempts also by Swedish Match in India to popularize cardboard matches, but it was virtually a non-event. As I was mentioning to you, the company was present in a somewhat of a strong measure in many urban centers, and leveraging this strong urban presence, strategy was to convert such markets wholesale into cardboard matches, not by way of a piecemeal kind of a thing. In other words, we said that we will give no option to the consumers, and we would just make the switch from wooden box to cardboard box overnight. This example is very unique because I don't think any company or any kind of industry you will have this kind of a situation of overnight switch from one kind of raw material to another, and it's a sink or swim kind of a strategy, and it required a lot of planning, and it required a lot of trust and faith in the kind of measures that we would be taking. In fact, when we did this in the month of in the year of late 70s or early 80s in Bombay, we had even the bewildering choice of what kind of brand names we could play around with. Each place had its own labels. We were actually having a big challenge because match is a very single dimension type of a product, where the customer will come and just ask for a match from the shopkeeper. He never really, almost never really specifies a specific brand, because he needs just a light, and he doesn't really, he's not looking for a flavor, he's not looking for a prestige value or none of that. And therefore, we were kind of having a very hard challenge to try and understand what was our core competency. Our core competency was in fact a strong market share wherein we could convert the entire channel, entire consumer franchise overnight if you wanted to do, provided of course all the elements of whatever you are doing were built on some very sound concepts. So there was a lot of excitement around a new product which was created by way of drawing the attention of the consumer to the side friction of the box. Perhaps many of you might not know that the wooden boxes had what can be called as a painted friction, which is basically phosphorus solution which was painted, whereas when the cardboard boxes were made, they were printed by way of these kind of dots. Instead of talking about the cardboard, which would have perhaps meant, drawing his attention unnecessarily to some controversial subject, we talked only about the side friction of this new matchbox, which would ensure all the 50 sticks at one strike would give you a light. This was the excitement which was built around the product. Believe me, lo and behold, within hours, virtually hours, the entire market got converted into cardboard boxes. In fact, on the eve of the actual launch, for the previous 2 or 3 days, we withdrew a lot of wooden boxes which were already there in the marketplace and told them that a new product is coming in. And on the day of actual distribution too, we replaced the entire old product by the new product and didn't let the consumer have any kind of option and a preference, etc. And that way we could make the product succeed 100%. As I said earlier, product had to be good, your distribution strategy had to be perfect, and on that basis we really succeeded in this particular thing. This is how we aligned the core competency with the market opportunity, which was of market challenge, you can even call it, of having to convert the entire market into cardboard matches from age-old wooden boxes. The another element of what strategy is comprised of is doing things differently. As I have mentioned, the essence of strategy is to do things differently than your rivals, or do the same things in a different way than your rivals. I'll give you an example of a different industry from chemicals. In Travanco Chemicals, where I worked for about 15 years or so, we were making a chemical called sodium sulfide, which is used very extensively as a depilator, which is basically removing the hair from the hides. And there's a very major leather industry, as you know, is concentrated in India, particularly in Tamil Nadu and areas like that. And this particular chemical is very essential for this process of removing the hair. It's a very corrosive chemical, and we were a major supplier of this chemical to the leather tanning industry. But this was also over a period of time, as the country had this small scale policies way back in 60s. This item was reserved for small scale, and there are a number of units which came up over a period of time, and consequently there was intense price competition. There was little or no product differentiation, and sodium sulfide is also a co-product of, it is a byproduct of what can be called as a barium carbonate. If you made barium carbonate, which is used in televisions and permanent magnets, you had to make sodium sulfide alongside. It was a byproduct which you could not avoid. Therefore, you had to find a outlet for this, and this was a very important segment of the market. But because of the problem associated with excessive price competition, and also the market also became very sensitive to how the leather market operated world over, we had to look at an alternative strategy for the company. And in that process, we looked at a value-added higher quality sodium sulfide, which is called the iron-free sodium sulfide, which could be manufactured for cosmetics. Cosmetics also use this product in very, very small quantities, but it's a very high value product, and this could be done only through a superior technology of using complete material made up of a metal called an alloy called monel, which is an alloy of copper and nickel. So both the vessel and the calandria had to be made out of this metal, and there was nobody who was making it at that point in time in India, and it was an outstanding success, and it freed the company from the wretched competition of fighting this kind of very low-priced competition, low-quality type of competition, and catering to the needs of the leather tanning vendors. This strategy of product upgrade instantly put the company in a different league altogether, and it also opened up export markets, because in export markets there is no question of selling your what is called the red variety of sodium sulfide, which had a lot of iron impurities, and export markets were already in what is called the iron-free yellow flakes of sodium sulfide, and therefore we had an unexpected benefit as also alongside the replacement of this particular marketplace. Of course, we continued to, for some more time, cater to the leather industry, but bulk of our investments, bulk of our profits started coming in from the new product, and it was an outstanding success, as I mentioned already. And as things would have it, the small scale units could not that easily copy and ape the medium scale type of an enterprise that this called for. Also because small scale in our country had been defined as a certain amount of capital investment, and therefore this required a higher amount of capital equipment, and therefore the small scale industries did not have this measure available to them, and to that extent we were insulated from what can be called as the leveling of the playing field, and to that extent we had a good run for many more years to come. Now there is the other element which I refer to in this slide, 2 slides before this, which is called trade-offs. Trade-off is an extremely important part of a strategy. You cannot be everything to everybody. You would have to purposefully limit what you can offer to the customers and create a need or a choice to the customers. You can perhaps see many of these things in your own experience, and I would just like to quote one example from a real life IT services field. So far I have been discussing only the products, but let me now talk about a service industry where you needed a strategy. Our company is in the consulting space, and we provide technical resources to clients on what can be called as the temp staffing, which is widely practiced in the field of IT services. Of course, you can have a full-length ladder of value-added situation, and you can also be at the first rung of the ladder. But whatever it is, basically it is a question of providing consultants, providing technical resources on temporary staffing for your valued clients. In the beginning, we were serving all customers, only consideration being a minimum margin that we need to not to be able to charge to the customer, keeping in view our own cost of operation, overheads, and so on and so forth. But over a period of time, we felt that this kind of catering to everybody was not really giving us any kind of an advantage, and it was also frittering away management time and management attention and caliber in catering to a wide cross section of industries. And therefore it was a very conscious decision to take one important vertical, which is called the BFSI, which is banking, financial services, and insurance, which are somewhat related to one another, being all of them dealing with money. And we decided that we will slowly come out of rest of the industries and rest of the verticals and focus on this one particular vertical, this one particular, I don't want to call it segment, because each one has its own speciality, and therefore we had to kind of go through a painful measure of letting go of some of our customers. This resulted in a specialization of domain. It improved the company's own capability to acquire a domain knowledge of banking, financial services, and insurance, and also marry that with the technical importance or technical requirement of the clients at various technologies, various platforms. And in that process, not only did we better our average margins, but more importantly, we were reaching a much deeper relationship with all our clients. So this is something which we must do in any kind of a strategy, and we invariably will have to make the choice of letting go of some of our customers and some of our market segments in preference for something in which we would like to specialize, and we would like to purposefully limit what we can offer, what we can do in terms of our resources, and maximize that. Then in the list of various elements of strategy, if you have observed, there was a item called long-term horizon. You know, strategy is basically, it cannot be a strategy for the month of March. It cannot be a strategy for the year 2011. That is not where strategy is appropriately used. Strategy has to have a long-term horizon. Typically, it could be anywhere between 5 to 10 years. The reason why I say 5 to 10 years is because all strategies are subject to disruption. There are disruptive processes which are constantly happening because competition is looking at you. They are also thinking in their own, air-conditioned rooms and trying to see how they can kind of strategize and how they can kind of capture the market, or how they can create a new consumer segment, and so on and so forth. Some of the major elements which, major factors which disrupt your strategic relevance or your strategy's effectiveness in the context of the market that you're there are, for example, technologies. A new technology can come, and overnight you would find that your profitability is going down, your top line is sinking. One very good example is of what you might have observed in the recent years, wherein RIM, that is Research in Motion, people who made the BlackBerry, who have really done a great job in the earlier years, are today finding that their profits are coming down, their sales are coming down. Of course, their market prices also, or their stocks are also low today, and that's because of the kind of technological upgradation and the revolution which has happened through the iPhones and Android and so forth. So bulk of the growth is being taken away by these kind of companies, and RIM, who are the manufacturers based in Canada of Blackberries, they are having a big problem having to kind of deal with this technological disruption. We are also familiar with how raw materials can disrupt a strategic relevance of a particular strategy. I have given you the example of the shortage of soft food, which ultimately led to a different strategy having to be forged, which comprised of not only rationalizing your brand strategy or brand options, but also selectively going for a marketing approach. Like for instance, we had to walk out of some of the hinterland, Mofussil kind of places where we could not do this saturation kind of marketing and so forth, and therefore our strategies changed as raw materials became more scarce, or different types of new materials, raw materials were coming into the marketplace. Well, we also know how consumer trends can disrupt your strategic relevance. I think the best example here in this particular instance is that of fashions, how fashions kind of overnight make your products irrelevant and they disappear. And lastly, many a time, government policies also make your strategy or your strategic approach to the marketplace irrelevant. And some of these things are to be borne in mind when we are talking about what kind of a long-term horizon are we talking about. It could be 5 to 10 years ideally, but sometimes it can be cut short by these kind of disruptive elements. Thank you, one and all.